So, Brian, welcome to the show. How are
Yeah,
you
going
doing
well,
today?
thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. So we start each show with a bit of a beverage, but you're not a huge champagne drinker, so I thought let's do like a champagne from the beer world, of which there's a couple. Probably the most famous is these Trappist beers, which are old monastery beers. Now, I mistakenly recommend you a beer that was not a Trappist beer, but a really good beer called a Rodenbach, which is like a sour beer. But let's just open them both
Yeah,
and
sounds
have a
good, mate.
beverage. What do you
Let's
think?
uh, let's get into it. So I had to go and source this
Uh,
from
Okay,
a
great.
local
So,
craft beer place earlier, and we were able to get it done.
I mean, I've got probably the most commercial brand of the Trappist beers, which is almost arguably, if you talk to a beer professional, they wouldn't really like this brand. But anyway, the point is, it's Trappist beers. They call them the champagnes of the beer world. So I'm just going to pour this one out here so you can kind of see what it looks like. Um, and these Trappist beers are from monasteries. So, it's a bunch of monks together brewing beer, very high quality, very old recipes, minimal intervention, long fermentation, high quality ingredients, very complex tastes, low sort of temperature ferments. So, it tends to be, I would say, one of the richest, most complex beers you can have if you're into beer. I myself am not into beer, but one of my beer geek friends tells me all about them, and I've tried quite a few. So I think my favorite was I'm going to mispronounce this, Vestvaleran or something. It's like $80 for like one of these 300 ml bottles.
Yeah,
So
cheers.
very expensive. But anyway, hey, cheers.
Thank you.
And yeah, here's to you. Oh, wow, that's nice. Very sweet. So apparently, these Trappist beers have very low hops in them, so very low IBUs or bitter units. So they tend to be a bit more malty, but very strong. So I think this is like eight
Yeah, that's
percent or
right.
something, 8 or 9%, or they go up to like 12.
That's
Yeah. So
7%
what's yours?
for what I've got. The Rodenbach 2017 vintage. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Oh, very nice. So it's going to be a bit sour, a bit very complex. And with that one as well, there's an interesting story. Actually, they use a wild yeast ferment. So when they brew the mash or the water with the barley and everything in there, it's left open for the natural yeast of that area to ferment the beer. So that is very indigenous. You can't replicate that anywhere else because it's going to be a different strain of yeast. But that's what makes that Rodenbach very unique in a way. Like you can't replicate that and trying to brew that in
There you go.
Australia.
Thank
So
you.
there you go.
Thank you. And I think from flashbacks, as you bring it up as well, I do recall
Nice.
a European trip, and I reckon it was an Italian place where I went to some monks and tried this sort of beer years ago. But it was I'm thinking like 15 years ago. But you've definitely jogged my memory.
Yeah, those monks were all over the alcohol fermenting because it actually used to. I think it used to use it for like herbal elixirs and things like that. So the alcohol was a preservation agent for these herbal remedies and such. And the monks had all the information about fermentation, which is, as we know, is a bit of a complex process. So back in the Dark Ages, they were the go-to kind of people, and obviously they like to enjoy a
Yeah.
beverage on the side. So there we go. But anyway, over to you, Brian. Can you give me just a really quick, like 1 minute summary, like what your career's been so
Yeah,
far and
sure. So
what you're doing right now?
I'm based down in Melbourne. I operate Hockey Stick Advisory. Hockey Stick Advisory exists to help ambitious companies build their partnership ecosystem muscle faster. So all companies want to grow, whether through digital, product led, through having sales teams of various sorts, or I think there's an untapped opportunity to unlock partnerships to be able to sort of fuel that growth. Build a competitive moat as they integrate more customers in around their business and build a more sustainable business as they go forwards as well.
Great. Okay, I love it. And do you play hockey
Yeah,
at
I
all
get asked
or
that a
not?
lot. No, the common tech term of hockey stick growth is the hopes and dreams of a lot of tech founders that they're what they've invented or created is the next big thing, and then they're on a journey. And so for a bit of
Yes.
tongue in cheek as well, they all do want to sort of have this up and to the right growth, and that's why I've sort of coined the name, which also sort of reflects that I don't take myself too seriously.
Perfect. I was just at a hockey game last week, actually, in Utah, and yeah, someone scored a hat trick and everybody's throwing the hats on the ground, so it's very interesting. But yeah, I get it. It's like that sort of inflection point where all the previous time and effort just
Hmm.
reaches this point where it just takes off
Yep.
and that rocket ship explodes. And I think that's the thing that every sort of startup founder or
Yeah.
tech person wants to get to. So I suppose that's a really good segue into how we can get there. And I think it's very interesting because you obviously do a lot of
Hmm.
work in partnerships, communities, and ecosystems, I would say. And I kind of see those as
Yep.
maybe a natural progression from left to right. But over to you. Uh, you know, what are, you use this term like partnership ecosystems. Is there such a thing? Like, what is the difference between like affiliates, Instagram collabs, partnerships, um, communities, collabs, ecosystems? I mean, if we had to
Yeah,
delineate
sure.
them,
Yeah. Yeah,
what
common
is this
questions
kind
to
of
get
thing?
to go with it as well. I think the one you missed there as well, channel, right? Which is, how do you distribute, your offering around it? Who else can sell your stuff?
Yes.
Whether that's car tires, petrol, you name it to go with it. And so that's probably like the foundational one that which are all common with today, and you go into a supermarket or anywhere. So that's a channel model. Partnerships is someone that you want to partner up with in a very instant, the use of the word to be able to, go to market together, sell together. Maybe they have an offering or solution which you don't do or intend to do, or customers you want to go after to be able to build that forward. Partnership ecosystems is the maturity of your partnerships coming together where you've got a one to many approach. And so you might partner up with lots of organizations who solve various solutions alongside your offering. Um, and what's the relationship of all them together as they're working together for your end customers or your suppliers to go with it around it. And, there's various forms of partnerships. You can have your agency partnerships. You can have integration partnerships, technology partnerships to go with it. So effectively, another organization outside of your own that you're working together to help solve customer needs or to go to market together.
And look, we did an episode before around sort of affiliates, and I think this is where maybe people do this sort of reach out to someone on social media, like a social media group, or someone who has a following and goes, "Hey, if you promote my thing, I'll give you a link here or some kind of code and redemption, and that's X%, and I'll attribute that to you." And that's kind of what they think as partnerships. Would you delineate that versus like
Yeah, I think
something
the
that's
version
called
you're talking
strategic
to is
partnerships
a
or
loosely
not?
based hopes and dreams that you're able to use their audience, that you're going to be able to hack it and they're going to be able to sell your stuff or promote it and influence it. And I think it's probably like
Mm.
one step removed. The partnerships in the instance what I'm talking about in a B2B world
Okay.
is primarily there might be an integration through, enabled through APIs. There might be a common set of customers that you're going after together. And there's a really sort of you want to try and treat your partners like your own employees or part of your organization as well as or an extension of, rather than have someone to promote your stuff, which is more of the affiliate model, I would say.
Then maybe we say we start with some, you
Hmm.
know, I hate to use the word collabs or something, or some, sort of branching out. And
Hmm.
I would say instead of selling directly one to one, we would then go out to adjoining organizations who may have a shared interest or shared audience, and then we sort of like start to have relationships with them. And then I think the next model is like creating a community of our own of people perhaps who come
Hmm.
together with a similar interest, and then we sort of feed
Yep.
them content or whatever. And then I think the next step is like really that ecosystem effect where there is something that you build at zero, which I want to hear more about. Where I think you sort of take partnerships to the next level, where you have like a network of partners almost. So like,
Yeah, so
how
I
would you
think to
define
start
those
off
kind of
with,
three different
what you're sort
things?
of talking about is you have the early stage of a community is you've got a bunch of early adopters of technology. They're your advocates who are out there who love it. They want to give more than they should feedback back to the teams and what it could be and get it. And they're really on board and they get it. And then from there, you want to continue to
Yep.
build out your partners and add more layers to it with the aim to trying to hit like critical mass, however you define it, where you've got a big enough customer base yourself and others who are on a journey alongside you. And that's where sort of the partnership ecosystem starts to come into play because you've got all of these different providers who are building solutions for your shared and mutual customers, which are coming together. And then they'll start to talk together and build new innovation on top of that. And then that's where you start to get the network effects, which is where you're keeping people on your platform or in and around that to go with
Yep.
it. And that's where you want to have your community to flourish. Because what you'll start to find is as you sort of go up that inflection curve that we spoke and joked about, is that you can't directly engage all of your partners together at scale. And so it's where community can come into real life to actually enable people together to try and achieve the similar outcomes.
Look, you sent me a deck from Canales, I think it is, or is that the right pronunciation? It was very interesting, where it had this sort of like influence, land, expand, and then this whole sort of network that they'd created. So, but that sort of left end it sort of started with influencers and affiliates and affinities and advocates, and then it's sort of like over the right hand side, it gets a bit more serious. So, do you see the same sort of progression from like, let's just pretend we're a very early stage company, limited resources, but we know we should sort of start doing partnerships and reach out to these groups or whatever, but we don't know how to do it, versus a company with like a dedicated partnerships or ecosystem manager who's like architecting and crafting these things? Like, is there like a continuum from left to right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so early stage companies, what they're
not?
looking for is to be able to grow and scale. And sometimes they're thinking like, who's got the most customers that we can go after? And we want to partner with them, supposedly. And so that's what they want to do around it. But the reality is they don't have the customer base. They might not have the reputation, the reviews, the depths of product, or actually the brand to provide any value whatsoever to the big partners that they hope to. And, my sort of 5 years at Xero, I saw many startups, scale-ups come to Xero reaching out like, hey, please, EDM all your customers or whatnot. That happened every week, really. But they're not sort of considering the big picture around what they actually bring to the table. They haven't established trust. They haven't established their core value proposition. They haven't established how Xero or others can win. And so they often, they don't typically bring much material returns. As companies start to scale this component, and like the name of hockey stick itself is, companies will sort of get to a point where they've got the direct sales motions going, and then they want to add some more layers to it, right? And so it's like, oh, we've got to do this partnerships thing. Usually they might put on a partner manager at that point, usually someone in sales or around it, or bring someone in with some experience to try and add another layer around it outside of growing their, selling more to their customer base direct to go with it. And so the typical model I see in market is they grow into having the need to have a partnerships team or a partnerships manager or someone to look at it as the partnerships that may have probably organically grown, and it might be like the CEO or the founder's mate or someone he used to work with, or some guy over there. There's something starts to build some momentum, and it could be like this thing, but they don't really know. But they need someone on it full time, and so that's how companies typically go down that path, rather than intentionally doing it by design.
I think that's really interesting because a lot of people ask me, like, is partnerships different to like channel sales? And I'm like, well, it's kind of like it branches off each other. Like if you're doing sales, you're selling one-to-one, then you're going, oh, well, I find this sales opportunity that has lots of customers that we can sell to. So if I have a relationship with that one person, they can sell our product into 5 of their customers. And you're like, well, that sounds a lot more efficient than going one-to-one, right? And using the same sort of fixed cost of time and energy, closing each one of those customers, right? So I think that's where a lot of companies go, oh, well, that'd be really cool if we found another 5 or 10 of those sort of nodes almost with multiple customers that we can bring in and sort of form a relationship with. And because it just means the exponential effect of your each sale is multiplied basically. So do you see a lot of partnerships sort of and ecosystem strategies, communities sort of branching off like a sales effect at its core?
Yeah. I'll say it was interesting over sort of my Xero journey is some apps who were sort of getting started, they would want to integrate with Xero, but then they start to integrate with each other horizontally across the ecosystem in time and start to build their own ecosystem. Because you picture like for a cafe that you walk in and order a coffee, they're going to have something to do point of sale. They're going to have to do accounting of some sort. They're going to have rostering systems to be able to pay that component. They've probably got an online store to sell some components. They might have reporting tools which plugs in. And so it's not one solution. No one operates a phone these days with just phone and text message. Apple says we've got like 100 apps plus on our phone. We use about 30 a month, right? It's much more than that. And so businesses operate the same. We've got interconnected tools to sort of operate.
Where do you think the crossover is? Like, I was sort of suggesting there's like a natural progression from sort of something junior to something more advanced, and ecosystems maybe being at the far end of that. But
so it's got to be progressive. So usually, sort of partnerships will start and be impactful if it's quite close to your core offering, right? Like if if you're selling car tires, it needs to be some other, car part to sort of go with it. It can't be something really far away to go with it. In tech, if you're selling into a certain industry, it's like what other players are in an industry which complement you quite nicely. There's a company in France called Reveal, and they've coined the term last year called nearbound. And the philosophy behind this is that, the customers you're going after, there's partners left and right who are either have those customers or they're looking to get those customers as well. And the analogy I like to talk to, which is quite sort of visual, is picture next time you go into a conference, there's all those stalls and stands of everyone trying to sell you stuff, right? There's the same amount of people which go into the door, and so that's the customers. And rather than have 100 stands, what if, 5 of them who are quite like-minded and it can actually work together and bandy together, or actually sort of partner up to sort of offer a combined solution which solves the needs of the people walking the door, rather than have 100 teams in silos, 100 headcount, 100 marketing campaign, branding exercises to go with it, right? So I think it's a good way to sort of visualize around how it can sort of stack up.
Yeah. So one of the facts you told me, very interesting. You had a slide deck that I saw, and it said like 75% of all trade is indirect. And 7 out of 12 of the largest companies in the world tap into ecosystems or have their own ecosystem. 77% of all companies see success in co-selling, so selling, like you just said, with other people. And customers who have been referred to you are 4 times more likely to close and 37% more likely to stay, so in a retention basis. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. Is that sort of the same in your
absolutely.
experience?
I think all of those numbers are actually increasing and magnifying, increasingly so. We live in an age of digital overload of information. And so if I go to Sydney, I'm Melbourne based, I wish I go for dinner, I'll just ask someone. And I'm like, oh, that's good. And done. I don't have to go jump online and go about it. If I'm looking for a new solution, if my friends, or it comes down to people you trust or people you trust in market you might not know, or thought leaders around it, if they recommend some components, then it makes sense, right? You want to, why are you going to waste your time and go through all the energy and effort to sort of go look at that if you do have that trust established around it? And so those metric numbers are coming through. Are definitely magnifying. I really see like partnerships more broadly. It's really it's moment, right? It's kind of like a time to shine. Existing sales channels are being exhausted. The recession talks magnify, especially coming from the US, which is very much in that direction already, as you I'm sure you saw last week.
Even direct response sort of digital media as well, like that sort of era is waning with privacy and some of those sort of cost controls coming in to hit those companies, so like that whole harvesting demand from digital direct response platforms is sort of waning. So I think it's sort of like maybe flipping back towards that old school, BDM side of things. And that's what I love about partnerships. I think, partnerships are the original BDM almost. Like if you don't do that, like that's the core of each business.
Yeah, exactly. Like who wants to be doing outbound direct, knocking on doors to end customers around it? Like why not sort of work together to sort of provide a better together narrative?
Yeah, exactly. So that brings me to the next thing, which is like what I noticed in different countries and different cultures. For example, in Southeast Asia and a lot of Asia, a lot of these partnerships are very ingrained in terms of the growth strategy. So especially when it comes to like a product sale. So like it's all like platform based. Like I have to be on this platform, that platform, and in these networks, and that's their marketing spend. Whereas I find in Australia, perhaps it's a bit more, let's do an advertising campaign and, use Marcoms as our strategy to then create sales and growth. And it's very interesting, like watching the two sort of like predilections. But like if someone like a company was aligning a budget and go, hey, I've got 50 million to do this. I mean, I feel that in Australia, a lot of the time they're just like, let's put everything into an advertising brand campaign and whatever, and then to see how it goes. Versus if you're in other countries, it'd be more about networking and partnerships and building out like a distribution network. I mean, do you find there's a lot of difference between different cultures and sectors, or like even between SaaS?
Yeah, I think so. I like your sort of analogy. I think it's a cultural thing, which is sort of underpinned by the some of the regional nuances of what you sort of see. But if you're going to set up shop and move internationally, do you want to go do it yourself where you've got no brand, no recognition, or do you want to try and partner with some local distributors highlight to value you are, build some trust, and then look for a way to sort of scale ahead. And so I think, industry, whatever industry it could be in around it, the user case still is applicable, and you sort of see it rolling out that way.
And you said that look, you finished at Xero like a couple of years ago, right? And then you branched out on your own and did hockey stick advisory, and then you said, oh, there's a lot of actual demand, and you were kind of surprised by how much there was. Do you think there's a bit of a void locally around perhaps what you have to
I
give
think it's just sort of the nature of where partnerships are sort of played. Like it's usually been on the CEO's right shoulder of founders, like someone go chat to these people and have a go attitude, which is kind of, a bit of a Aussie culture a little bit around it. Like you've always had defined sales departments, you've had defined marketing departments, and they've always have headcounts and there's training behind
Yes.
them and there's industry standards, but partnerships are still coming to life around it as around. And some of the benefits which we talked to just earlier and the sort of trends that we're sort of seeing as, the measurability and impact of these are coming to the forefront is that sort of the industry is maturing. What's really pleasing in market is that there's a real build in market to go with it. And like I've hosted events before where, partnership events, I say, put your hands up if you did a Bachelor of Partnerships at university, right? And like, beyond a few organizations building courses today, it actually doesn't exist, right? You can do partnerships modules and a few components in a few select US universities, but it's either a learnt skill or learnt skill of what it's not, or it's an evolving skill, which is everyone sort of building in market, which is cool to see.
Yeah, it's funny because there's no like formal training around it. Like you have product-led growth sort of companies and training around that. You have marketing training, you have sales training, but you don't have really partnership training. It's so nuanced and deep. And I think like sometimes, like you said, it takes the executive control to then go, hey, can you please pursue this? Or, the investor recommends, oh, you should talk to XYZ company because they have a similar sort of market to you or whatever. So it's very haphazard, I find. There's no sort of like structural playbook. So, is there resources you would recommend people to look to or sort of playbooks that
Yeah, so there is some
proven that
evolving
you'd
sort of training
recommend to
coming
look at?
through. Desmond Russell up in Brisbane, who formerly led Microsoft Ecosystem, has got a company called Partner Elevate, where he's got partner onboarding and skills to help partnership people, create more attention to their partners and not have to be dependent on other partners and build their own business. And he's doing really well. In the US and Silicon Valley, you've got Sassy Leadership with some courses on partnerships, which are well received. And also in Kansas, you've got Partnernomics led by Mark Brigman. And so there's a few courses and infrastructure sort of coming through to help support industry, which is increasingly coming through. But it's still early days because it's not the default department, which gets a big budget, big headcount, and to go with it, right?
Have you found the last couple of years that this buzzword around community and community building has become quite big? So obviously some of the barriers to creating your own community management platforms, etc., have decreased in price and increased in accessibility quite a bit. And I think social media was the early stage of that, or groups, and that has then morphed into sort of self-managed community platforms, I would call them. And where do you see that sort of going in the future? Like you mentioned this term,
Yeah, I think it's a buzzword
growth.
of something which has been around forever, right? Like you picture your local footy club, it could be your netball club, around for what it is. So community-led growth is like, how do we bring people of the same, hobbies, interests, skills together, enable them, keep them engaged, and becomes the defensive moat of our engine, as well as a growth lever to be able to get other people on board. Hey, come join our golf club kind of mentality. With that, I think the leading thinker in that space is, in my view, is David Spinks from the States, who's got a really good book called The Business of Belonging, which I would recommend. Locally here in Australia, I'd encourage people to check out the Community Collective run by Paz down here in Melbourne, where she's bringing together all community managers, exactly solving what you sort of said, John, of like, where do community managers all hang out, all right? They've got a community for community managers. Okay. And it's really encouraging seeing that come to life as well.
I think, like I was just doing this probably 2 months ago with a small business client, and, we had a social media following, we had a newsletter list, and I think, there's a proportion of your customer base that want to get a bit deeper, and they want to contribute and give back as well as receive. And I think I had this this discussion with this social media person called Marcus back in season 3. We talked about social media strategy, right? And the irony around social media is that a lot of people don't invest in the social part of social media, which is responding to comments, giving back information to people and like engaging them, because obviously that's expensive and it requires like human input. So a lot of people are just on their soapbox, just disseminating information through a channel, which is happens to be certain social media platforms. And I think the next step beyond that is like your own controlled community, your own social media platform, if you will. But I mean, what does that require to do that? I mean, the tech is getting cheaper than ever, but like, what resources have to go
Yeah, so
behind to do that really
you want to
well?
hang out where your community is, right? So if that's Facebook groups or Slack groups, Discord, Telegraph, you name it,
Mm.
Saturdays 9 a.m. hockey clubs, whatever, right? Um, you want to make so there, and then like the rule of thumb, sort of thinking through what are the community metrics is that you want your community growth to grow in line with or faster than your business growth, right? You want to make sure it's engaged and people are around it, and so the concept is that you want people just to spend time and engage, give back, learn, but also have the chance to share knowledge as well and pass it back. So it is like a vicious flywheel of moving around, and that's where the sort of the beating heartbeat is.
Do you feel like some people get this wrong in terms of like it's a one-way communication street instead of a sort of a two-way feedback loop, if you know what I mean? Like, when you're creating communities and partnerships for that matter, or
Mm-hmm.
ecosystems, it's this quid pro quo. I think if people are maybe less experienced, they go, "Oh, look, I want to leverage your customer base because it's a similar customer base to mine, and I want to sell my product to your customers, right?" And then the negotiations, the discussions, sort of start off on that front foot instead of, okay, where is this mutual give and take here? What can I contribute? What can you contribute? Can we sort of form a relationship that
Mm-hmm.
starts here and then is ongoing and blossoms? I think that sort of like maybe strikes at the heart of all these different iterations of
Yeah, I
communities and
think
partnerships. I
I
mean,
reckon that's
what's your
the
thoughts on that?
number one error when people are aiming to set up partnerships is that they see potentially a golden egg of this company over here or people or group or community have got access to all the customers. I'm going to go, knock on their door. If you owned a shop and someone came in just trying to sell you something out of off the street, you'd be like, just go away, leave me alone. And that seems to be the common mentality. However, if you think
Yeah.
about why that is, it's they might have given a partnerships or a salesperson a mandate to go drive new business through partners and like trying to access it. And so it probably comes down to the KPIs of how it's traditionally done because they're effectively given a sales metric for what is a partnerships model. Now, inversely, if you applied a different approach
Hmm.
where it's like, these are the customers I want to go after or the particular merchants or the community I want to go after, and you actually lead with like, hey, I want to come help out. I want to come contribute. I want to give you guys some referrals. I want to help your marketing, your comms, your sales teams, your leaders look good and start to offer value first and start to build some trust. And it does take some time to go with it. Then, are they in a return like, oh, I love these guys. They're making us look good. They're making individual people look good and promote. And then the willingness of them to sort of to give back comes in time, but it's definitely not led with asking or demanding stuff, which ends up in minimal results, but it's really commonly done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find this quid pro quo of perceived value is like probably sits at the core of all business in general, and this is just one manifestation of that. But look, I think, there's a lot of tech tools that have come up to help scale what is inherently, we're discussing, a very unscalable activity. Is there any out there that you recommend that are popular? And is there shortcomings to some of this partnership or
Yeah, I think it's
ecosystem
still got a
community
long way to
management
go
stuff?
and it's coming through. In tech itself, there's a few main players in account mapping tools, so where you can sort of safely share customer base in an environment and sort of say, so with that, there's either, Crossbeam, Reveal, Partner Stack is another one to go with it. And they've got the capabilities to say, oh, which customers do we have
Yep.
crossover with? Which ones do we not have access on your side? Which ones do they want access on your side as well? And then how do you have sort of various campaigns to sort of target and work with those? So they really start a conversation. And then beyond that, somewhere between CRM land of HubSpot and Salesforce and others, there's also PRM, so there's partner relationship. Um, models as well, where they're actually sort of saying, well, these are all my partners. Here's the partner portals. Here's the tools to go with that. And, for the partnership leaders Catalyst conference last year, which I attended in Miami in August, Jay McBain, who's the leading global channel chief in lots of ways from Catalyst, he indicated there's over 200 plus tech providers in this space today as well. And so I think, there's a lot of investment in this space. Increasingly more locally, there's a great offering up in the Gold Coast from Partner Portal, it's called, to be able for brands to be able to sort of work out who you want to sort of partner up with and how do you do campaigns. And they make that really easy, and that's sort of definitely one to watch coming through.
What do these tech platforms not do that you need to have? Like, what kind of groundwork do you need to do before you use these platforms to scale? Mm-hmm. Like we kind of mentioned quid pro quo, value props, figuring out exactly what you offer, what they offer. Like, is there sort of some guidance? Because I just feel like some people go, oh, look, I'll create a community. Okay, I'll sign up to this tech community platform, $1,000 a year or whatever it is. Boom, I've got a community. And then they realize, oh, wow, there's a lot of other things that need to go into making that work.
Yeah, you got to definitely walk before you run. There? And so, who are the 2 or 3 key partners which you want to work with, right? What's the strategic partners which is actually aligns and makes sense alongside your organization? Get them humming, and then who's the next layer to go beyond that? Where's the advisory, those advocates we spoke about to sort of help accelerate your growth a little bit wider for the next layer of distribution? And then what's the next layer around to go with it? And the challenging part of that scaling component, which is where community comes in, is like, how can you continue to add value to all of these partners at different levels ongoing? Is that so they all want to continue to work with you? And that's a sort of model as it sort of triages out as you sort of get bigger and sort of grow down that channel.
Well, I want to get to your process pretty soon, but anyway, before we get there, let's just pretend we need to sell this idea to executives or the powers to be to fund this. So, partnerships, affiliates, referral, community management, whatever. If you're putting together a business case for this to someone who maybe doesn't know as much as you, what are the sort of main key points you would be hitting on to sell?
Yeah, I mean, I'd start off with say, do you want to build out a massive sales team and fund it all yourself, or do you want to work out a better way to go business so you can go faster, increase your distribution, and don't have to build it all out yourself? And so for some of the stats we spoke of before of like the opportunity to sort of partner up, to go to market faster, to unlock customers that you don't currently have access through building key partnerships and enabling those, there's an opportunity to go faster rather than worry and fund it from your own direct sales efforts ongoing. And so when you sort of look through the stack, the options, wherever it is, building features that you intentionally and strategically decide not to do, or if it's customers that you don't have access to today, is it an integration you don't want to build if it's a tech partnership? There's multiple levels around how businesses can, play the role of a complementer to a platform and grow with the larger organization as a way to sort of scale.
And on that note, is there any sort of like very serendipitous or unusual opportunities by doing this work that you get through these channels that you don't get through any other initiative in the business? Like, I'm sure things have popped up in communities or things that you've read when people are interacting. They go, oh, wow, I've never thought of that before. And that wouldn't have come through any other marketing or sales.
Yeah, I think that's the intention of every hackathon on the tech front, right? Of like, oh, what's his idea? Let's come up with something new, right? And but the reality is if someone's able to solve a really key component that no one else has built to and build to the gap around it, just do that really well, then why not? It's better outcomes for the customer. It's better outcome for the other partners alongside you, and you've got a better together narrative to go with it.
Speaking of that, I mean, are there any really good ecosystems, communities, partnership sort of networks that you know of that you can speak to that you're like, oh, this is just like the perfect example of this? Like for me, and I hate to use this example because it's a big brand, everybody knows it, but Apple is, I would argue, one of the masters at creating an ecosystem, and with sort of these moat-based network effects. They got the iOS. You want to switch devices, they make it hard. Like we were mentioning at the start, if you've got an Android device trying to pair with an Apple device, like there's intentional friction or technical errors that just happen to pop up. There's they make it very easy to stay within their product group, but as soon as you move out, they make it difficult. I mean, who do
Yeah,
you look
Apple's
up
obviously
to
done a
in this
phenomenal
space?
job of, creating network effects so you're all interconnected and it's hard to leave, right? I think AWS has done another great example. I really like Stripe, the payments company. They've been referred to as the platform of platforms because, they're powering payments across the whole internet and plugged into so many capacities behind the
Mm.
scenes. In e-commerce, Shopify's done an incredible job to be increasingly the default e-commerce provider for SMBs and increasingly through their Shopify Plus offerings. However, they've got a 6,000 plus apps, driving through their ecosystem, and Shopify is not building 6,000 plus solutions, right? Atlassian's got thousands of solutions.
Yeah, they've like
Yeah,
outsourced all their sort of add-ons, haven't they? Like it's like why have your own product team create everything when you can just outsource it and get the market to produce the best
yeah, and even
add-ons to
like
your
you
own
see,
core product,
Zoom,
right?
which is we all know much more than we like, has got a Zoom app marketplace front and center now, right? Because they're trying to build solutions to connect with solutions beyond just their video calling software, and we know other people use it. So how can you bring it front and center so there's a better together narrative? And so it's increasingly the way of the world. And imagine picking up your phone just using it for one thing these days. It's just not the case, is it?
And the other thing was HubSpot. So I mean, I've dealt with these people before. I think I've interviewed Sean Ellis on a previous interview, and he's very friendly with Damesh
Yep.
from HubSpot, and they did a really good job at creating an
Yep.
agency sort of partner network, you would call it, and enabling those agencies then
hmm
sell even to other agencies, not just to the client, but to other agencies or sub agencies, as well as the end customer. And it's funny because ironically, a lot of people think, oh, HubSpot, we're all about inbound and, creating content and getting customers coming in through that sort of content interaction. But like they make the majority of all their sales from
hmm
this partner network of agencies. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. But I mean, did you
Yeah,
sort of admire
absolutely.
that
And
network
in
as
North
well
America,
or not?
HubSpot's very on a pedestal for good reasons. So they've enabled a whole, effectively, there's a whole layer
Mm.
of services and project businesses who are, onboarding, supporting, and enabling HubSpot under the hood ongoing. And, that's thousands of agencies and people working in those, which HubSpot's not paying directly for. Those agencies charge the end merchant. They might give a clip of that sort of
Yep.
transactional revenue ongoing as well, but it's a way for them to do scale. Xero very much is definitely in Australia and New Zealand has been unlocked the accounting and bookkeeping channel. And so they're quite side by side with that model around the interconnectivity between the parent software company, the enablers of the channel itself, and then the end customers, clients, merchants alike.
What are some of the challenges though when we're
Mhm.
doing this? We kind of mentioned the business case, right? Like, why should we pursue this? But then also there must be some pretty major impediments, like whether they're, internally cultural, maybe it's a budgetary issue, maybe it's just like, the payback period needs to
Mhm.
be too short for it to be realistic. I mean, what do you see as the main sort of barriers or roadblocks to, these kind of
Yeah,
initiatives
yeah, great
working
question.
really,
There's a
really well?
guy from partnerhacker.com called Jared Fuller, and he often says, partnerships is a strategy, not a department, right? And I like that because it is an ongoing investment for it to
Yep.
come to life. And some challenges we sort of come through is as you start to build too many partners, how do you continue to add value to all of them ongoing, right? And so that's usually mitigated through a well thought out and designed partner program around milestones and benefits and what the value exchange is ongoing. Another issue which I see HubSpot leaning into now is channel bloat. They've got so many partners at a critical mass level around it as well. Is that sometimes they're fighting against each other, and you don't want that race to the bottom model, which you sometimes see.
Yeah, it's like franchises like McDonald's. You got too many people in the same territory, so they they put sort of geographic
Yeah,
boundaries around that to make sure they're not competing too much directly against each other. So there's like a threshold you get to where you're like, well, we can't oversaturate
yeah, and
that
they have to
initiative,
have
right?
partner programs where there's benefits and tiers and levels around accordingly to it, right? But you want to be able to farm out leads accordingly and keep it growing, right?
Mm.
So if the onus is on the parent orchestrator of the platform or software company to continue to add value downstream in a scalable way. And so bigger company, bigger problems, right?
Okay, and
Hmm.
what about when you're starting community? So this happened to a client of mine a couple of months ago. We bought into
Hmm.
a community sort of management platform.
Hmm.
It was called Mining Networks. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. They're all of varying degrees
Hmm.
of the same. But anyway, it was just a bit hard to get a bit of traction. So we're shifting from, I would say, a social media and email communication channel, and direct communication via phone and direct email to, okay, come and join this community, and we can sort of talk about the same things in different channels or group rooms or whatever. And it was actually pretty challenging. So the the thought behind that was that, hey, you'll just be an instant success, and we've got some really good content. People are just going to go crazy, but it actually required a lot more, I would say, work and cajoling than we'd expected. I mean, is that sort of true in your experience as
Yeah, you've got
well?
to continue to feed a community and continue to add value, and you want people engaged and contributing towards it. If you're not contributing towards it, it's just another Slack channel. It's just another social media platform, another medium to try and contact them around it, and it's a waste of your efforts to start up around. So that's where you've seen the explosion of community managers in recent years across all organizations. Their role is really to facilitate that advocacy around it, right? Because that's fundamentally what you're after. You're after advocacy over loyalty. You're after those customers who are going to go tell everyone all about it, ongoing around it, and not just use the product and say nothing. And so that's what you're trying to drive forward. And unless you bring some of those people who are not at that level up to speed, if you don't create that engagement, that safe zone, have that trust to go about it, it's just not going to materialize results or the engagement of what you're after.
So are you saying that then the best way to seed a community, if it was starting from scratch, like some people may be thinking, listening to this episode and thinking, okay, we need to create a community. Like, what's your best advice about doing that the best way? Is it to identify some of those like
Mm-hmm.
very, like I would call super fans, or like very high advocacy sort of customers, and then use them to
Yeah, that's right.
seed the rest of
Yeah,
the
so you
community?
really got to
Or
get
what
those
can you
early
advise around
adopters
that?
on board and continue to spread the good word, right? Because they're the ones they are your ones in market out telling around it, and then you want to breed the next layer of those to go about it, or encourage to build a cycle where those advocates are bringing other people onto the platform and they're producing content and they're doing engagement, they're asking questions, and they're learning things, and that's the way to sort of get to grow the moat effectively.
Look, I love this in terms of mode and strategic sort of channels, but let's just go
Yeah.
into a bit more of your process, if you don't mind, divulging uh, maybe at a surface level or something a tiny bit deeper for the
Hmm.
listeners around your approach. So, just to say that I hired you to help me, and I do this all the time anyway, to advise clients like, hey, let's build out a
Hmm.
partnership strategy, or let's build out a community strategy, or let's
Yeah.
execute an ecosystem, or let's build this from scratch.
Hmm.
So I'm hiring you. Um, what is your process from the start?
Hmm.
Let's just pretend they don't have anything. We talked about quid pro
Hmm.
quo and value props and that kind of stuff. I'm a big proponent of understanding the
Yeah.
buying context,
Yeah.
or the JTBD, jobs to be
Hmm.
done, sort of
Yeah.
context
Yeah.
of the sale of your product first, because then gives you lots of ideas in terms of vertical and horizontals. But like, over to you. Can you just run me through like how you would, if a client hired you,
Yeah,
sort of
sure.
go
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
start
Good
to
question. So
finish?
to start off with, you need to look at like do just an audit. Like what is it? What isn't it right now to start off with? What did you want it, hope it to be? What's your sort of ambitions around it? And so that can be advanced and nothing, or hopes and dreams, or aspirational to start off with. And so you got to sort of get at the benchmark of where that company's up to, right? And so it might be sort of engaging with the leadership, the founders,
Yep.
CEOs at a high level, the board potentially around what it is today. From there, actually, you need to go through a process and actually consider like, what do you actually want partnerships to be? Like, what are you actually trying to get out of it? Like, is it a case of you're wanting someone to fulfill a feature gap, or there's a component that they do that you don't do around it? Is it a case that you're looking for distribution from others? Are you trying to add more value to your customers? You've got nothing else to sell to them, but how can you help them win as well? Maybe drive your NPS up to go with it. So what are those core objectives that you're sort of looking to go around it? From there, you need to start to consider and you go through all the sort of wish lists of what you want us to do, and you build out a prioritization component around, okay, these are the core objectives of what we're trying to achieve. And then the big one, which is I think massively underestimated, is like, all right, well, who's going to do the work on this, right? Ideas are cheap as always, right? So who, capacity in the team, or
yeah, you
yeah,
just buy some tech, right? You don't need anyone to manage the community, right? It's not labor
yeah,
intensive at
yeah,
all. You
right.
just
So it's like
click a
oh
button
yeah, we're
and
going to
some
go
tech
after these partnerships, and you're
done.
like, well, who's going to do the work? As a founder over there, sort of already working weekends, who can't do it in the earlier stages, or as partnership managers working hard, or what it is. So that needs to be a really honest conversation, or if you're going to make serious about it, make it impactful,
Yeah.
to go through it. So from there, you come down to a prioritization process to go about it, and you sort of say, all right, well, this is the direction why these partnerships make sense. There's strategic partners, technology partners, integration partners. Maybe it's just brand affiliation of like, hey, we're going after the same customers. Let's do some stuff together from there. And then it's a case of working on the part. Yeah, go on.
I'm really interested to know because I have a method of doing this, but
Mm-hmm.
like
Yep.
identifying prospects to be partners or to
Mm-hmm.
people to reach out to, I think is kind of like a very interesting discussion and way of thinking about things. So for me, what
Yep.
I do is I understand the buying context and I go, what else do customers buy when they buy this product? Like what other categories do they merge into? Other brands do they buy? And then I look at the vertical and then I look at the horizontal. So end to end. And then I
Yep.
I sort of mind map this out from the
Mm-hmm.
center of that buying context. And then that gives me really interesting
Mm-hmm.
things that I maybe wouldn't have thought about off branching off that sort of core buying experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
So because
you
you start off with
have any
looking at your
guidance on
ideal
that
customer
or not?
profile, and then the next layer to go with it is like, what's the ideal partner profile? So who are the partners who are also going after that ICP that you sort of speak of, right? And so once you start to identify, you've worked out what partnerships is and isn't, you know what it is strategically, you've narrowed down the priorities around, okay, well, this is the approach we're going to go after. And it's a case of the model you just mentioned of like starting to look into, all right, well, who are those partners that I want to go after? And the most important part before sort of getting going is what are you going to offer them? How can you activate them? What is your partner value proposition to be able to take to them before you knock on their door or reach out or start conversations that where you can build trust, you can help them win. How can you help people on the other side get promoted? That'd be the ideal goal, the aspirational moment I always say is like, how can you bring services, products, customers, referrals to help people on the other side get promoted? Because, every partner's got a choice and they're looking to, they've got limited time and bandwidth. And if you come out of the blue asking them big demands, they're just like, we'll chat to you in 12 months or 2 years, right? And so what you're looking to do is like, you're trying to accelerate up their
Yeah.
to-do list.
Yeah.
Yeah, accelerate up there. I need to chat to these guys. You want to be the exciting thing that they bring to the table. And so before you can ask for anything, and so what partners are, who you want to go after, how it helps your end customers to go about it. Then you start to work on your partner value proposition to be able to build a compelling case that they're going to effectively give you attention amongst other competing resources to go about it.
This is something that you help your clients architect because, that requires a bit of a separation from your own business in a way, doesn't it? Like, everybody says, my product is awesome, it's going to solve everything. But I mean, there needs to be some sort of like thought behind that process. Maybe
it's a lot of that as well. And sometimes especially early
or
stage companies, they've got their business is their baby, but it's like, well, if the companies which do great are ones who nail a niche. Right, they do this 1-2 thing really well, but the broader they go, the more effectively lighter offering they have, and the crapper customer experience they have, they can't continually top it up. And so it's interestingly that those who are building point node solutions, solving a small components are able. Typically, what I'm seeing in market is they're able to sort of go faster, and then left and right of them or up and down, they sort of partner with other solutions in and around it, but they don't try and do it all. And it seems to be a bit of a secret sauce around it, and so I often have to try and unpack that for companies and try and say, well, what do you really want to be, or where are you heading? Or don't tell me that we're thinking about it, or it's on the list and it's coming, and try and tell your customers there. Like just, create awesome experiences, drive great customer outcomes, great NPS, and then you're set up for sustainable growth.
Also, I think ownership is a big thing here. You sort of mentioned like who is the person that's going to drive this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, is it the salesperson? Oh, is
Mm-hmm.
marketing going to do it? Is product going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of existing departments that are in there. But then generally, most companies, I think that take it seriously, at least have one person who's like the partnerships manager or strategic partnerships kind of person, whether that starts out as the one of the senior executives of the business and then sort of devolves off into a sort of structured role. I mean, how do you see that sort of happening at an
Yeah,
early stage
there's
and
probably
maybe a
two
later
important
stage
questions
company?
to ask on the other side when you're starting that. You've done your prioritization work to go with it, right? Like, what is the core KPIs, objectives of the company that you want to reach out with? What are they? What are they trying to achieve as a company level? And then secondary, who's the person directly responsible for achieving those KPIs, OKRs, or bringing it to life on the other side? And so now you've got a motivated party. You've got someone what they're trying to achieve. And, despite workload, despite partner programs or other opportunities, if you're able to enter with something bring to the table to help that person win, are you going to be like an ally or like an enemy early on when you sort of start to, go with those conversations? And so, it's amazing how it sort of starts to change the needle early on and the approach around it and the impact to sort of go with it. And so, I'm working a lot with companies to sort of get them to that stage around it. And then from there, I'm working with a coaching and accountability against those sort of narrowed priorities ongoing around how they're delivering against it and how the approach is working and how they're building momentum through it, right? Because as companies sort of start off with, whether it's, founder-led sales is another classic US term of like trying to unlock those partner sales, to putting in a partner manager, to building a partner ecosystem or having
Yep.
platform strategy components, is the depths and the complexities does change as you start to swim upstream.
This happened to me actually. I can't mention which company, but there's often partnership managers who are employed on a full-time basis, and they're always working on a partnership that's about to close. But the lag is so long, like 1 year to 2 years, it just actually never closes. So they're just constantly never closing anything for years on end. It's a great salary. You can earn 100, 200K easily, and just say you work on large partnership deals which never close. I mean, I think, what would you do to prevent that sort of dynamic happening, i.e., some sort of glorified salesperson that doesn't actually know how
Yeah,
to
so
close a
I
partnership?
think there's two ways to look at it, right? Like there's outputs and inputs. There's outputs of like how you're helping those other partners win, how many engagements you have, how many leads have you passed them, how many components around it have you paid it forward, how have you supported their marketing, their comm, their leadership, and all those components, how have you rallied the business. And the more you do more of that, it's kind of like a leading indicator. And it's kind of like the laggard indicator is the outputs where referrals start to come back to you. And there's a few ways to look at the sort of partnership success. It's what's
Mm-hmm.
partner referrals, where are they bringing business into you? Or where is their partner influence? So how can, collectively by you partnering up, start to influence the buy decision for some of the benefits we spoke of before? And they sort of go out into different, tranches depending on sort of the objectives of what you're trying to achieve.
Mentioned, okay, let's just get back to your process. So I cut you off a little while ago, but you were talking about like looking at your ICP or your sort of buying context, right? Then being enabled through the executive
Mm-hmm.
to have
Mm-hmm.
budget and resources to pursue these kind of things, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you would like take a bit of a target list, right? And then pursue those
Mm-hmm.
things. But look, back over to you. Was sort of, if you ran
Yeah,
through the rest
so
of the
so
process,
you've worked out okay,
where are we going
so
to go
you've
from
worked
there?
out what partners you should go after based on your own company sort of priorities to go with it. Then you're starting to open those conversations with the top
Yep.
three priority partners around it, and you're trying to start to say, all right, well, like I said before, what is the company objectives of what you're trying to achieve, and who's the person responsible for that? Make sure you can answer those components, and then go back to the drawing board on your side and think about how you can add value to that ongoing as a part of that
Yep.
process in order to build it up. So just like a sales pipeline, you're building out your core key partner pipeline, but you're doing it in a way, in a mandate where you're not actually at this stage
Mm-hmm.
looking to unlock customers, to build gaps. You're actually trying to help those other partners to win. You're trying to actually spending all your time and energy about to enable those components. Because if you're able to be, the fries with that, if you're able to help be an extra tool in a toolbox which gets the job done, accordingly, They're not paying for your wage bill. They're not paying for your company. You come willing as a part of it. You need to give for a period of time with your key partners before you expect things to come back in return. And so the role I sort of play is playing that strategic guidance
Okay,
around
great.
that, what is best practice, and the methodology and the principles to be able to apply that in market.
So, look, it sounds pretty complex, but like let's move on to like measurements. So, I just mentioned the example of a partnerships manager who was all promises and talk and didn't deliver for a number of years, and then
Funny that, yeah.
moved into a different role, which was funny. But yeah, very surprising. So how would you put some sort of controls or measurement controls on the partnerships or ecosystem community management sort of like department or initiatives? Like, we can measure things like, oh, we've put like 60,000 people signed up here, but I mean, are they there every day? How much do they interact? Are the partners selling things? I mean, what sort of key measurement metrics are we going to look at here when sort of assessing the efficacy of some of these
A lot of
initiatives?
them, unless if you're primarily wanting partnerships to be drive net new business through, which is reality more of a channel. There's a lot of metrics behind the scenes, which depending on your stage of growth, which effectively set as a benchmark for the partner managers to achieve against, right? It could be if it was a integrated approach and technology solution partner enabled through APIs, you're looking at an increasing growth of the number of connections to the platform or to your customers. And so make sure that's growing at a steady component. And so the partner manager, as per any sales leader, you wanted to have an unfair upside of showing the uptick to grow on that component. You can look at the number of engagements back and forth, whether it's a activity-based selling, like how often are you touching base with your partners, what's the regularity of it to go about it, and making sure that they're actually engaged with the said portfolio to go with it. The number of marketing, webinars, events, co-marketing offers, what are you doing to sort of drive demand back in? And then on one side, and then on the other side, like what are they bringing back into the business, right? There's some metrics under the hood which you'll be able to look at. How are connected apps with connections, churning versus those who are not? What is the NPS of connected customers sharing solutions or adding more value versus those who are yet to adopt? What's the logins of those connected apps versus those who have a singular solution around it? What's the lifetime value of the connected solutions or the ARPU or the connected growth versus those who don't, as sort of like outputs as a part of it? And how do they sort of measure up and metric up? Some of those partner technology solutions I mentioned before have got some really good dashboards under the scene to be able to sort of look at what those core metrics are. But it does come back to the stem with what you actually want those partnerships to be once you've done that prioritization sort of strategy work around it, which you would then get your partner managers to obviously benchmark across and where you'd set your KPIs and OKRs against, right?
I think that's a good guidance around measuring things. But I mean, ultimately, like, are people more engaged? Are they buying more? Are we acquiring more people? Are they staying around for longer? Are they referring other people? It's kind of like the things that I'd be looking at, you know what I mean? And then like there's a range of like soft and then hard metrics around that, some of which will be correlated. But yeah, look, I think we sort of mentioned a little while ago some of these, I would say, orthodox beliefs that we know to be perhaps untrue. And I think it's a bit of a Peter Thiel question, but I ask this to everybody. I mean, around partnerships, ecosystems, and communities, I mean, are there some things that everybody thinks is true that you know to be wrong as a practitioner? Example, let's create a community. As a community, we'll solve all our problems. We'll just sign up to the software for $1,000 a year, and it'll just magically work. But in my experience, it requires a lot of manual intervention and tactical nuance to actually create that sort of network effect to start churning. And that sometimes it takes a year or 6 months or longer. But over to you. I mean, are there sort of some myths that you want to dispel?
Yeah, they start off with like partnerships. Brings immediate return. It's like it is a strategy which you need to invest with, and it's got to, it takes some ongoing investment and some strategic thinking in order to sort of enable it, if you're serious about it around it. The other one as well is it's quite a common belief that, through these partners or this one Halo partner, there's going to be a fire hose of customers. And it's actually not the case either. You need to do the work in order to sort of earn the trust before those sort of benefits start to come down the track. In tech in particular, there's a saying of, you you can keep adding more sales people around it and try and have an accelerated growth and, stay ahead of it, the curve as well. But there's a tipping point where you'll start to mature out around it. And there's a term sort of say jumping the S curve. How do you keep going again? And, partnerships behind the scene is a hopes and dreams of to be able to sort of go about that around it. But it's not a case of you just turn it on today and you've got a new partner channel just flooding you with net new leads, business, all channels together. And so, it's a big part of the education of companies I sort of work closely with as well, making sure they have that really aha moment before they sort of go down this path.
I mentioned before this ex-colleague of mine who was, I would say, very bright, sort of a good MBA, good university, but I would say not very well versed at executing or materializing sort of, I would say, hardcore business metrics. If we had to contrast perhaps someone who's very junior and inexperienced and ineffective at these initiatives versus somebody who's very experienced and perhaps someone like yourself who, has been around the block a couple of times and knows exactly what to do and what not to do. What are the hallmarks of that first person versus...
Yeah, so I think the more junior person getting started is primarily probably come from a sales background or being a good generalist or has a can-do attitude, and off they go trying to unlock what these partnerships components are. I think the more experienced person will be looking at things like what's the mutual success plan, how can they help others win, where it makes sense to spend their time. Don't go and try and chat to every partner around it. Who are the core key partners who you can align to, but make strategic sense on both sides. You can sort of help and grow together, and treat your partners like employees or part of your team and not that of someone that you're door knocking to, just trying to extract something from as well. And so there is a bit of maturity in the approach and what they expect around it. And a big part of it as well is over communicating back internally around how it's progressing, what it is and what it isn't as well. So an emerging trend increasingly in tech, for maturing or growing and established businesses which have got a partnerships focus is partner operations, right? Like, how am I engaging with all my partners? What does that look like in a CRM or a PRM? What information do they need? What sort of blueprints, assets, resources around it? How can we seamlessly do components? Because if I'm looking to have a bunch of partners or a growing amount of partners, how can we do stuff with everyone interconnected and make sure things that if there's commissions or referral payouts or commercial models behind this or mutual customers, how is it just not people behind the scenes doing a bunch of manual work to go with it? And so that's definitely coming through to fruition, and partner ops roles are definitely in demand for companies as they sort of get bigger.
You mentioned a resource. I'm just going to look at my notes here. Alex Komorowski, it was he did this presentation around partnerships, thinking about it. I think I'm just talking about like the general approach of philosophy here in terms of viewing it like a gardener instead of a builder. And I think it's a really good analogy in terms of how am I helping other people grow instead of I'm building everything to then grow something. And it's I would say a delineation between I am the product and you must follow me and grow my product versus I'm just a facilitator of an organic growth process, if you know what I mean. Like, what do you think about that in terms of like a general guide to viewing these initiatives?
Yeah, it's kind of like a principle or a mindset around that. You're there to help others win, continue to add value ongoing, and the more you do that, there'll be a cyclical nature where it'll be able to come back to you around to apply. The big tech companies, the big platforms, like Shopify example, they're not building 6,000 plus apps themselves. They're allowing open APIs to be able to connect information in to make Shopify even more powerful. But they have to kind of let go a little bit on some edges, around the edges. Xero does accounting software really amazingly, but they're not building retail apps or trade and construction apps. So they allow access to the open APIs for others to build to it to provide awesome connected solutions to what effectively are mutual customers as well. So the more that means for a trades business, they're able to have the best of both worlds, where they've got a connected solution, so they can sort of go faster, do what they need to do, and focus on working with their customers more.
I love it. Okay. And look, you've been in this game for, I would say, at least 5 to 10 years now. What have you seen that has really changed over that period of time? And also, on the flip side, what has stayed the same that is reliable that we can talk about?
Yeah, I think I've seen like probably two trends, like the emergence of like a built-in market mentality with partnerships. Used to be like quite protected and don't tell anyone around it, but I think I'm really liking that model of actually sharing ongoing and like challenges. Everyone doesn't have the right idea, but there's learnings and there's a continued evolution to go with it. But I think under the hood, the technology is getting better, so you can measure it around it increasingly more as well. And so the metrics are actually getting better to validate it, which is why it's getting the importance and the significance in a lot more organisations today. And so there is a bit of a tipping point where I'm quite bullish of the outlook of it's continued to come to the forefront. Communities and sub communities will continue to evolve around these sort of partnership ecosystems components and engaging these little sub communities that we're sort of seeing is just going to magnify.
I deal with a lot of what do they call them, solopreneurs or entrepreneurs or business owners, and we all have our own sort of systems of communicating with our sort of loyal customers or followers, for example. But I find it like a trend in the future is like owning your own media at a higher level. So, a lot of people are using newsletter programs or community management programs where they have like full
Mm-hmm.
control over the databases, and that is their sort of like
Mm-hmm.
key resource, for example. But yeah, it's interesting to see sort of where it goes. I think, sometimes when tech makes everything easier and more approachable and more user friendly, more people pile onto it. But what's lost is really that strategic core in terms of like why you're doing it and what's the value transfer, and those kind of things. That's
Yeah,
all gets
absolutely.
lost.
Towards the end of last year at HubSpot's global conference Inbound, Dharmesh, the well-respected founder, the theme for the conference was community, interestingly. And it was like this catch line he said, which is like keeping everyone connected in a disconnected world, which is pretty true, right? We've got information coming at us left, right, and center ongoing, and everyone wants you to sign up to their newsletter, to their information, their feed, and stay top of mind and omni-channel.
Yeah.
Let's just hammer people at every angle from when they wake up to go to sleep and around it. And so, whereas that human element of where you stay connected around it and who do you trust and who do you go to and who do you look towards for you to sort of make decisions and move forward is an interesting trend which many are sort of chasing, going after it.
Interesting. They bought the hustle from Sam Parr for a large amount of money. His podcast, by the way, or YouTube channel with Sean is one of the best YouTube channels. If you're into business and want to find out how business
Yeah,
actually works,
yeah, I know.
one of
Well,
the
it's
best
a good one. Yeah.
YouTube videos. But also, Damesh has a really good YouTube channel as well that I highly recommend as well. Yeah, My First Million, I think it was called, the Sam Parr one. It's amazing. But yeah, look, okay, great. I think that's been a really good discussion in terms of that. Is there any sort of stories or anything that I've left out that you want to mention, like some really good ecosystems or community networks or whatever that companies have built that you're a huge
Yeah,
fan of
so
that we haven't mentioned
beyond
today?
Hockey Stick Advisory, I also lead up Partnership Leaders APAC chapter, which is a US online community where it's connecting partnership people across the business, across the industry. We've got over 50 members across APAC today, but the idea is we're trying to have a rising tide moment and connect people, help each other win, and how can we rise, create the sort of benefits of what we spoke to before. So if you're looking to build partnerships and listening to this, or looking to sort of consider what is the strategy, I encourage you to check out the community. It's quite active, engaged, and you're able to draw a lot of insights and expertise from people either in Silicon Valley, the US, up in Europe, or across APAC to sort of drive forward great outcomes. And so I'm quite bullish, right? Like I could go out there and use my network myself and sort of, which I've been able to build over time. But I feel like, we're better together and there's an opportunity for to share from international learnings to apply to APAC and get involved.
Yeah, some really good communities out there that are like very underground,
Mm-hmm.
but like very good operators, high
Yeah.
quality, well vetted
Yep.
members that are just like gold mines. But yeah, look, that was great. Okay, what about? I'm sure you're a
Mm-hmm.
person that is well read, but I ask this question to everybody: is there a book that you've read recently that has changed your mind for the better? It can be related to this topic or not, or just in general. What's on your reading list that you've really enjoyed
Yeah.
recently?
I'm an avid reader when I can amongst the kids around it. I really like Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing.
The Hungry
Yeah, the
Caterpillar.
Hungry Caterpillar. And reading Hungry Caterpillar 10,000 times, stuff like that. You know, um, yeah, I like Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, just around having those frank, hard conversations, be able to sort of manage up, manage down, and being able to sort of make progress. The conversations, being able to have those conversations which people will leave out of the room and don't mention or don't stand up around. How do you sort of lean in with that and do it in an authentic and honest way is a way to progress. I think it's holding back a lot of us. And you see it ongoing. It's always, you finish a meeting with a corporate, it's the conversation out to the lift or to the water or over coffee or a beer, which you actually get the actual.
And everybody like basically does everything to avoid ownership,
Yeah,
like at all costs. It's like the opposite
yeah,
force, isn't it? It's like you have a meeting and they're like, okay, someone else can do that. Okay,
yeah,
bye. So you've got to fight against that natural force. I find a lot of times to get things done.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to sort of lean into that a little bit more or whatever we're up to in life. And yeah, definitely got some takeaways from that one.
What about a quote or a meme? Could be a comic or something. On this topic that just makes you laugh every time because it's so
Yeah,
true.
so Jay McBain, who we quoted earlier, he says the decade of the ecosystem has arrived. And considering the fact I've set up Hockey Stick Advisory to go all in on that, I can't stop saying it enough. But, I see it coming to life, and that's why I'm sort of going after it and the opportunity. And I think a lot of companies have got the opportunity to sort of to go faster through this methodology. So I tend to rattle that one off a bit.
On that note, is there some sort of like headwinds you think that are precipitating that shift? We've talked about, and just today there was some privacy legislation released in a little country of Australia around customer privacy, which will have huge ramifications on digital acquisition channels and the like. Do you see some sort of headwinds moving more towards in your direction that would make partnerships and community and ecosystems a bit more valuable and a bit more pursued than
Yeah,
would
in the
otherwise be the
US tech
case?
economy, which I think is definitely sort of 6 to 12 months of where we are down here in APAC, is with a lot of the tech redundancies across the board as companies been chasing growth in recent years, there's been a lot of redundancies in partnerships per se because they are an investment and they are a strategic asset which you need to invest in them. They don't necessarily bring uh, partner revenue today, but they're building those channels out. And so there's been some reductions in headcounts across the board. And so there'll be either sort of like a few different ways around it. Those who are heavily invested already got their own ecosystems going. I expect them to go faster. Those who have had reductions in their sort of space or sort of stall in their space and some of their competitors will get ahead. And those who continue to try and sell stuff by themselves in isolation without sort of going down this route will actually probably go backwards. And so I'm looking forward to sort of seeing this play out in market, but it's definitely sort of shaking the industry. What it is doing, however, is it's making people more accountable to have better ROI and to be able to understand the impact of doing a bit more than ever. And so in the partnership space, it's the industries that are able to sort of grow up and evolve and be able to come to the forefront where it makes an impact. And it's making people pretty focused, which is definitely where I'm spending some efforts with some companies I'm working with.
I know you've mentioned your
Mm-hmm.
company a couple of times. So let's just do it again and anything else that you're working on. But over to you. What do you want to promote and get the word
Yeah,
out
I'm
there
I'm
about?
quite active on LinkedIn, sort of sharing the good word of what I'm up to and things that I'm sort of seeing in market. And so people can connect me on LinkedIn. Check out my website at hockeystickadvisory.com. And if they're looking to sort of go faster or explore what partnerships is or isn't, feel free to reach out and we can sort of see what. Interesting, you said, John, before as well, is that some companies I've actually worked with and said, "Hey, let's build some partnerships." That are excited, and I've gone back to what their core priorities. I've said, "Oh, it's actually not for you right now around it if you're not going to invest in it." And so, yeah, extreme ownership maybe, and leaning into what it can and can't be, but realizing and helping educate execs of what the opportunities are and guiding down that path with a very clear mandate around progressing and bringing it to life.
Thanks for your time. I think it's been a really good crash course in sort of this, I would call it a
Absolutely. Yeah.
growth lever
Yeah.
or, a number of growth levers, depending on how you want to execute this. And the best way for people to contact you, you said you're very active on LinkedIn or hockeystickadvisory.com. I'm sure you can fill out a contact form there and
Yeah,
contact you.
yeah, it
Is
is
that the best
absolutely.
way?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
not?
Meet the community where they are, and that's where mine are, and that's where I spend my time accordingly.
Okay. Last question. How was the
Yeah, it
beer?
does. It's a bit of a
What do you think?
flashback back to some era before where the monks are at. So a good initiative. It's been some time before I've since I've drank a beer out of a pop top champagne Intimidator bottle. So yeah, it's quite nice to drink.
It's quite I mean mine as well, very deep rich flavor. You know what's really funny in this sort of world, like let's just talk pretty meta about the trends, but like people have been conditioned to have less complex flavors over time, so we're being conditioned to reject complex
Hmm.
flavors basically because you know the sort of McDonald's and simplification of flavors and regression to what I would call a lowest common denominator of flavors means that when you try something very complex like this, it's been a yeast that's been there for 300 years and a very old process, very complex organic barley, for example, you get a
Yeah, yeah, it's a good way to describe
very
it. Yeah.
deep taste that you don't
Yeah,
get from
absolutely.
anything
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Are
You
you
wouldn't.
finding the
You'd
same
sort of
or?
sip on this like a good Scotch kind of.
Yeah.
But whereas you wouldn't be at the pub with your mates
Yes.
having heaps of these, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
No, no, this is not a session beer. You'd have one of these maybe, and mostly they're made to have with food, so you're not really supposed to have more than one or
Yeah,
two of them, if you know what I mean. So, and obviously,
yeah,
they're pretty expensive. So, like $14 for a beer, is quite a lot for a bottle. But anyway, look, thanks, Brian, for talking about partnerships, ecosystems, and communities. Really appreciate it, and yeah, all the best in the future.
yeah.
And
Thanks, John. Thanks for having
thanks
me
for your
on. It's
time.
been
Really
good to share
appreciate
some
it.
insights. So yeah, look forward to chatting ahead.